The village of Umuachi was a place of simple people, bound by tradition and faith. For years they prayed for a spiritual leader who could guide them through life's hardships. Their prayers were answered when a man named Pastor Ezekiel arrived. He was charismatic, wise, and, most importantly, he had the power to perform miracles. Within weeks, the once empty church was filled with worshippers eager to witness his divine touch. Sick villagers were healed, barren women conceived, and those struggling financially suddenly found opportunities. It was as if heaven had finally smiled upon Umuachi. Yet, there was something unsettling about the pastor. His rise was too sudden, his wealth too abundant, and his sermons, though inspiring, carried an eerie undertone. Some villagers whispered that the man was no ordinary preacher, but who would question a man of God, especially one who had brought so much prosperity to their doorstep? Barely a year after his arrival, Pastor Ezekiel had built a mansion that stood at the highest point of the village. His church was no longer a small wooden structure, but a massive edifice with golden chandeliers and imported furniture. While the villagers rejoiced in his success, a few questioned how a mere pastor could amass such wealth so quickly. Adanne, a young and fearless woman, was among the skeptics. She had always been wary of men who seemed too good to be true. As the daughter of a late herbalist, she understood the power of unseen forces. While others sang praises of the pastor's miracles, Adanne watched from a distance, her instincts warning her that something was not right. Then the disappearances began. At first it was just 1 or 2 people who went missing. An old man who wandered too far into the forest, a young boy who was last seen playing near the river. But soon the disappearances became frequent, and fear crept into the hearts of the villagers. Whispers of strange occurrences circulated, tales of eerie noises coming from the church at odd hours of the night. Adanne grew more suspicious. She noticed that those who vanished were often people with little to no family, those whose absence would not cause a significant stir. She decided to investigate, despite the dangers that lurked in the shadows. Something dark was at play in Umuachi, and she intended to uncover it, no matter the cost. Determined to find the truth, Adanne made up her mind to keep watch on the church one fateful night. Hiding in the shadows, she observed Pastor Ezekiel as he left his grand mansion and made his way to the altar. The night was eerily silent, the only sound being the rustling of leaves. Suddenly, Adanne's breath hitched as she saw something slither past the church steps, something long and scaled. The pastor stopped, and to Adanne's horror, the creature reared its head. It was a massive serpent, its emerald eyes glowing in the darkness. Then, in a voice that sent chills down her spine, the serpent spoke. "Have you brought my offering?" Adanne covered her mouth to keep from gasping. The reality of what she was witnessing sent a chill through her bones. Pastor Ezekiel knelt before the serpent, bowing as if in reverence. He reached into his robes and pulled out a small bundle wrapped in cloth. The bundle squirmed, and when he unwrapped it, Adanne's stomach turned. It was a newborn baby, crying softly. The serpent flicked its tongue, hissing in approval. "The child will suffice for now," it said. Pastor Ezekiel chanted an incantation in a strange guttural language. Then, with a sudden motion, he placed the infant on a stone slab. The serpent coiled around it, and in the blink of an eye the baby was gone, swallowed whole. Adanne bit her lips so hard she tasted blood. She wanted to scream, to run, to do anything, but she remained frozen in place. This was not a dream. It was real. And now she knew the terrible truth about Pastor Ezekiel's power. Adanne fled from the church as fast as her legs could carry her, her heart pounding in her chest. She needed to tell someone, to warn the village, but who would believe her? Pastor Ezekiel was revered, almost worshipped. If she accused him without proof, she might be the next one to disappear. She reached her home and locked the door behind her, panting. She had to be smart, she needed a plan, but most of all she needed allies. There had to be others in the village who suspected something. Tomorrow she would start looking. But tonight she prayed, for strength, for wisdom, and for the souls of those who had already been lost. The morning sun cast a golden hue over Umuachi, but Adanne felt only darkness in her heart. She ventured cautiously through the village, seeking out those who might share her suspicions. She visited Mama Oluchi, an elderly woman known for her wisdom and knowledge of old traditions. "I have seen the signs," Mama Oluchi said gravely after listening to Adanne's story. "The pastor's power is not from God." She led Adanne to a hidden part of her hut and revealed an ancient book of spells and incantations. "This serpent is an ageless being, one that has been worshipped for centuries by those seeking power." Adanne's heart pounded. If the serpent had been controlling Pastor Ezekiel, then exposing him would not be easy. But she knew she could not turn back now. She had to act, or more innocent lives would be lost. As she left Mama Oluchi's hut, she felt the weight of unseen eyes upon her. Someone had been listening. Someone who did not want the truth to come out. Adanne walked briskly through the village, her mind racing. She needed more allies, more proof. But danger lurked at every corner. She knew she was being watched, and if she made one wrong move, she could be the next to disappear. She sought out Chijioke, the village blacksmith, a man known for his distrust of the pastor. "Something is wrong," she whispered. "I need your help." His face hardened, but he nodded. "Meet me at the riverbank at dusk." As the sun set, Adanne made her way to the meeting place, unaware that Pastor Ezekiel's men had already set their traps. She was no longer just an observer. She was a threat. Adanne crouched behind a thick tree, her heart hammering as she watched the riverbank. The sky had darkened and the sound of crickets filled the air. Chijioke had not yet arrived, and an eerie silence settled over the area. She felt the weight of unseen eyes upon her. Something was wrong. A sudden rustling in the bushes made her tense. She turned quickly, only to be grabbed from behind. Rough hands covered her mouth, muffling her scream. She struggled, kicking and clawing, but her captors were too strong. As they dragged her through the dense undergrowth, she caught a glimpse of Pastor Ezekiel's most loyal followers. Their expressions were blank, their eyes dark. They were no longer men, they were servants of the Serpent. Adanne woke up in a dark, damp room. The air smelled of decay, and the faint glow of a single candle flickered against the cold stone walls. Her hands and feet were bound, the ropes digging into her flesh. She knew where she was, deep within the bowels of Pastor Ezekiel's church. Footsteps echoed down the corridor. The heavy wooden door creaked open, and the pastor himself entered. His face was calm, his eyes gleaming with an unnatural light. "You have seen too much, Adanne," he said softly. "You could have lived a simple life, but now you have forced my hand." Adanne lifted her chin. "You're a monster," she spat. "You pretend to be a man of God, but you're nothing more than a demon." Pastor Ezekiel chuckled. "And yet my followers kneel before me. They bring their offerings, their devotion, their lives. Who are you to challenge the will of the divine?" She refused to be intimidated. "I will stop you." His smile widened. "Then let us see if you survive the night." Hours passed in silence. Adanne's mind raced as she struggled against her restraints. She knew she couldn't escape on her own, but she also knew something Pastor Ezekiel didn't. Chijioke had seen her taken. He would come for her. A hissing sound filled the room. Adanne's breath caught as a large, shadowy form slithered into view. The serpent. Its emerald eyes gleamed in the dim light, its forked tongue flicking as it regarded her. "Do not fear me, child," it whispered, its voice slithering into her mind. "You are strong, stronger than the others." Adanne swallowed hard. "What do you want?" The snake coiled closer. "Freedom. My power is bound to the pastor, but I was not always his servant. Break the covenant, and I will give you the power to destroy him." Adanne hesitated. Could she trust a demon to defeat another? But time was running out, and she had no other choice. "I accept," she whispered. The serpent's eyes flared. Then the game has truly begun. The moment the serpent slithered away, the ropes around Adanne's wrists loosened on their own. She hesitated, wary of the creature's magic, but she could not waste time questioning it. She bolted toward the door, her pulse racing. Outside, the church was eerily silent. She moved cautiously, avoiding the main corridors, listening for any sound of the pastor's men. As she neared the exit, she spotted Chijioke hiding in the shadows. Relief flooded her. "We need to move," he whispered, handing her a knife. "They will notice your absence soon." Adanne nodded, gripping the weapon tightly. Together they slipped into the night, unaware that Pastor Ezekiel had already sensed her escape, and he was coming for her. Dawn was breaking as Adanne and Chijioke ran through the dense forest. Every rustling leaf, every snapped twig sent shivers down their spines. Pastor Ezekiel would not let her go so easily. Chijioke turned to her, his expression grim. "What did you see in that church?" Adanne took a deep breath. "He's not just a man. He's bound to something ancient, something evil." Chijioke's jaw tightened. "Then we must be ready to fight." They had escaped, but the battle was only just beginning. The village of Umuachi was still under the pastor's grip, and unless they acted quickly, more lives would be lost. In the distance, a low, menacing hiss echoed through the trees. The serpent was awake, and the final war was about to begin. Adanne and Chijioke had no time to waste. They had to warn the villagers and rally those willing to fight against Pastor Ezekiel. They reached Mama Ife's hut just as the first rays of sunlight peeked through the trees. The old woman, known for her wisdom and deep knowledge of spiritual matters, opened her door cautiously. "Child, you have the look of someone who has stared into the abyss," she murmured, her sharp eyes studying Adanne's face. "We have to stop him," Adanne said urgently. "The pastor is not human. He's something else, something dark." Mama Ife nodded gravely. "We have known for some time that evil has taken root in this village. The elders feared speaking against him, but there is still hope." With Mama Ife's help, they gathered a small group of villagers who had also grown suspicious of Pastor Ezekiel. Chijioke laid out a plan. First, they needed to break the pastor's hold on the villagers. But before they could act, the sound of distant chanting filled the air. Something was coming. That evening, the villagers gathered in secret while Adanne and Chijioke crept closer to the church. From the shadows, they saw the congregation kneeling before Pastor Ezekiel, their eyes blank, their lips moving in eerie unison. At the center of the altar, a massive serpent coiled, its emerald eyes glowing with hunger. Pastor Ezekiel raised his hands, his voice deep and commanding. "Tonight another sacrifice will be made, and we shall receive divine blessings." Adanne gritted her teeth. If they didn't act soon, another innocent life would be lost. She turned to Chijioke and nodded. It was time to strike. With torches in hand, the resistance stormed the church. Cries of alarm rang out as flames licked the edges of the once holy sanctuary. Pastor Ezekiel's followers tried to resist, but the villagers fought back, their fear replaced by rage. In the chaos, Adanne and Chijioke forced their way to the altar. The serpent uncoiled, its tongue flicking as it sensed the rebellion. With a roar, Pastor Ezekiel's form twisted, his skin darkening, his limbs lengthening. Before their eyes, he shed his human disguise and revealed his true form. A towering, monstrous snake with glowing eyes. "Fools," he hissed. "You think you can stop me?" But Adanne had one advantage, the bargain she had made with the serpent. She felt a strange power stirring within her. It was time to end this reign of terror. The battle between man and monster erupted. The villagers screamed as Pastor Ezekiel lunged, his massive form striking with lethal precision. Chijioke swung his machete, slicing at the serpent's thick scales, but the beast barely flinched. Adanne, heart-pounding, stepped forward. The ancient power whispered within her. She reached out, feeling a strange connection to the serpent. "You do not belong to him," she said, her voice steady. "He enslaved you." The great snake hesitated, its glowing eyes flickering. The ground beneath them trembled. Pastor Ezekiel let out an enraged shriek, realizing he was losing control. Adanne knew what she had to do. She had to break the bond. She lifted her hands, channeling the energy the serpent had gifted her. A blinding light erupted from her palms, striking the monster in the chest. Pastor Ezekiel howled as his body convulsed, his dark magic unraveling. The battle was reaching its climax, and the fate of Okuta hung in the balance. With a final deafening roar, Pastor Ezekiel's form began to disintegrate. His once powerful voice turned into an agonized wail as the serpent rebelled against him. The villagers watched in stunned silence as the massive snake, now free, turned its piercing gaze upon its former master. "You betrayed the covenant," the serpent hissed. "Now you shall face the punishment." The serpent lunged, coiling tightly around Pastor Ezekiel. His screams filled the night as the creature squeezed, crushing him beneath its immense power. Within moments, the once mighty pastor was reduced to nothing but dust and echoes. The church, the source of his dark influence, collapsed in on itself, flames consuming its foundation. As dawn broke, the village stood in silence, the weight of what had transpired settling upon them. The terror that had ruled over them for years was gone, but so much had been lost. Adanne turned to the villagers, her heart heavy yet determined. "We must rebuild," she said. "Not just our homes, but our faith. Faith in ourselves, in each other." The battle was over, but a new journey was about to begin. Days passed, and Okuta slowly healed. The villagers worked together to restore what had been lost, their spirits no longer shackled by fear. The land itself seemed to breathe again, no longer tainted by the dark presence of Pastor Ezekiel. Adanne sat by the riverbank, watching the water flow peacefully. She had never thought she would be the one to challenge a force so powerful, yet here she was, a survivor, a warrior. Chijioke joined her, sitting quietly for a moment before speaking. "You did it," he said. "We all did," Adanne nodded. "It's not over yet. The scars remain, but we will heal." And as the sun rose over Okuta, the village welcomed a new era. One where darkness no longer ruled, and the people, at last, were truly free. Even as peace returned to Okuta, shadows of the past lingered. The villagers tried to forget the horrors they had witnessed, but the ruins of the church stood as a grim reminder. Some believed it should be burned completely, while others saw it as a lesson never to be forgotten. Adanne, however, knew that evil had a way of returning when left unchecked. She visited Mama Ife, seeking wisdom. The old woman sat by the fire, her eyes reflecting the flames. "The serpent is free, but its power is not lost," she murmured. "Something ancient sleeps beneath this land, waiting for the right moment." Adanne felt a chill run down her spine. The village was safe for now, but for how long? She knew Pastor Ezekiel's dark influence had gone beyond just his physical form. Evil had a way of surviving, of finding new hosts to corrupt. She had seen it before. That night she dreamt of a vast underground cavern filled with whispering shadows. In the center a massive altar stood, cracked but not broken. The whispers grew louder, echoing in a language she did not understand. Then a pair of glowing green eyes opened and a voice, cold as death, whispered, "I am not yet finished." Chijioke and a few villagers gathered to clear the remnants of the church, but as they dug, they uncovered something sinister, a hidden chamber deep below. The walls were lined with strange symbols, glowing faintly in the dim torchlight. At the center of the room lay a stone altar, still stained with blood. "This is where he made his sacrifices," Chijioke whispered, his voice trembling. "But why is it still here?" A distant rumbling made them freeze. The ground beneath them shuddered, as if something had stirred in its slumber. Adanne clutched her pendant tightly, realizing that Pastor Ezekiel's death had only been the beginning of something much darker. She traced the markings on the altar with her fingers and gasped when she recognized a familiar pattern. These symbols were older than the church itself. They had been here long before Pastor Ezekiel. "We need to get out of here," she said, her voice urgent. "Whatever he awakened, it's still alive." The village elders gathered, their faces grim. "That altar was built centuries ago," one of them explained. "It was meant to contain an ancient force, one that should never be released." Adanne felt the weight of destiny pressing upon her. The battle was not over. If the covenant still existed, then its power had to be sealed away forever. But how? A voice whispered in her mind, soft and familiar. "Find me," it said. She knew then that the serpent had not vanished entirely. It was waiting, watching. Pastor Ezekiel was only its vessel, Mama Ife added gravely. The true evil is still searching for a new host. Adanne realized with dread that the village was still in danger. The serpent's influence was not gone. It had simply been set free. Guided by visions, Adanne set out towards the sacred grove, a place whispered about in legends but never truly explored. Chijioke insisted on accompanying her, along with 2 other brave villagers. The journey was treacherous. The deeper they went into the forest, the more the air thickened with unseen energy. Strange sounds echoed between the trees, and shadows danced where none should have existed. Their torches flickered as if the darkness itself was trying to swallow them whole. At the heart of the grove, they found it. A massive tree, its roots twisted and gnarled. Embedded in its trunk was a relic pulsating with dark energy. Adanne recognized it instantly. It was the heart of the covenant, and it had been feeding off the land for centuries. The serpent had never truly been defeated, only hidden. As they approached, a figure emerged from the mist, a woman, draped in garments made of leaves and bones. Her eyes glowed with an ethereal light. "You should not be here," she intoned. "This place is sacred." Adanne stepped forward. "We seek to end the covenant once and for all." The guardian studied her before speaking. "The power bound to this land cannot be destroyed, only transferred." Adanne's heart pounded. "Then tell me, what must be done?" The guardian's gaze turned sorrowful. "A soul must be bound to the land in its place." The guardian led them to a pool of crystal-clear water, its depths reflecting a sky that was no longer their own. "To seal the covenant, a life must be given willingly," she said. Adanne's breath caught. "A sacrifice!" Chijioke grabbed her arm. "No, there must be another way." The guardian shook her head. "The blood that was taken must be repaid in kind." Tears burned in Adanne's eyes. Was this truly the price for peace? She looked at the relic pulsating with dark energy and knew that this was the moment that would define everything. That night, Adanne stood by the pool, torn between duty and self-preservation. She had fought so hard to survive, to free her people. Could she now give it all up? Chijioke knelt beside her. "You are not alone in this," he said. "We will find another way." But deep inside, she knew the truth. The covenant's hunger would never be sated unless someone willingly took its place. As dawn broke, Adanne stepped forward, her resolve firm. "I will do it," she declared. The guardian nodded solemnly. "Then kneel." The ritual began, ancient words flowing through the air. The water churned, glowing with unnatural light. Adanne felt her spirit lift, her body growing weightless. Then at the last moment, Chijioke pushed her aside, taking her place. "No!" she screamed, reaching for him. The guardian's eyes darkened. The decision had been made. The world trembled as Chijioke fell into the water, his body convulsing as the sacred energy engulfed him. Adanne screamed, reaching for him, but a force unseen held her back. The air around them shimmered, and the pool pulsed with a blinding light. The relic at the base of the tree cracked, sending a shockwave through the earth. The serpent's wail pierced the sky, echoing across the land. Adanne clutched her chest, feeling as though a piece of her soul had been torn away. The sacrifice had been made. The covenant had been sealed. The land beneath them rumbled violently, as if rejecting the ancient power's release. The tree split down the middle, its roots writhing like living veins. For a moment silence filled the grove, an eerie stillness before the storm. Then the relic shattered completely, sending a final surge of energy through the forest. Chijioke's body was gone. Adanne fell to her knees, weeping as the realization sank in. The man who had stood by her, who had fought alongside her, had given his life to end the darkness. The sky above cleared, the oppressive weight of evil lifting. The serpent's presence had been erased from the land, but at what cost? The villagers gathered in silence as Adanne and the others returned. The air was thick with grief, yet something had changed in Okuta. The land seemed lighter, the shadows that had once loomed over them now fading. The river that had run dry for years now flowed with fresh, crystal-clear water, and the fields that had withered began to regain their colour. The curse had been broken. Adanne stood at the centre of the village, her voice shaking as she addressed them. Chijioke has saved us all. His sacrifice will not be forgotten. She turned to Mama Afe, whose old eyes brimmed with sorrow and pride. We must ensure this never happens again. The villagers nodded, their faces solemn. Together they gathered stones and wood, building a monument in the heart of Okuta in honor of Chijioke. It would stand as a reminder of the past and a warning for the future. Evil could only take root where fear thrived, and they would never allow darkness to rule them again. Adanne, though weighed by grief, knew her purpose. She had been spared for a reason. She vowed to become the village's guardian, to watch over them, to ensure that no other force would ever corrupt their land again. Years passed and Okuta thrived. Where once there was fear, there was now laughter. Where once there was death, there was now life. The monument of Chijioke stood tall in the village square, flowers blooming around its base. The village elders, once haunted by the past, now walked with renewed purpose. Adanne had taken her place as protector, ensuring the balance of their world remained intact. She spent her days teaching the young ones the lessons of their history, warning them of the dangers of unchecked power. She had also begun studying the old ways, learning the secrets of the ancestors, so that she might one day pass them on. One evening, as she sat by the river, a breeze carried a familiar warmth, a presence she had thought lost forever. The water rippled, and for a brief moment she saw Chijioke's reflection beside hers. His lips curled into a faint smile before the image faded. Tears welled in her eyes, but she did not cry. She had not lost him. He had become part of the land, part of the wind, part of the very spirit that now protected them. As the sun set over Okuta, painting the sky with golden hues, Adanne knew the truth. This was not just the end of a dark chapter. It was the beginning of a new era, one where light would always outshine the darkness. And as long as she lived, she would make sure of it.